Give everyone one more minute just to join. Okay, good evening. Right, let's make a start. Hope everyone's well. I'm just going to recap briefly the case that we had last week. The truth is, we're moving on this week to a different case, but there was an important point that we didn't quite wrap up with that last time, and I think it's a fascinating question. Basically, the case was, this was the bottom of Vav Amud Beis, top of Zayin Amud Aleph. The case was we had two people, one living upstairs and one living downstairs. They both inherited a house together, and one took the upstairs apartment, one took the downstairs apartment. The problem was that the house wasn't built the house wasn't built very well. So basically, you had this sinking house. So that the upstairs floor, if you remember, basically was sinking, right? So that the doorway of the guy's house below, I don't know whether it's the whole floor, it seems to be specifically the doorway, was basically sinking into the ground to the extent that it got so bad that he could hardly get into his house. And the guy above says, listen, and the guy below says, listen, I want to rebuild, right? And the guy says, the guy above says, I'm very happy here, thank you. I have no need to rebuild my house just because you've got a problem here. You can crawl into your door, and it sounds very cruel, but the reality is that the question is how far. Really, the question of the Gemora is, of course, is how far can he go so that it's still within his rights to say, I don't want to trouble myself, right? Obviously we hope. I imagine we hope people would, in reality, be a bit nicer than that. But the case is he doesn't want to be, and Rav Chama paskened that he is legitimate. It is legitimate. All these are all case studies. They seem to all be actual cases. He is legitimate to say to him, he's within his rights to say to him, I'm sorry, as long as you can still get in your house, then I don't have to, you can't force me out. I don't want to live somewhere else. It's uncomfortable for me to have to move out, and it's tough luck. But we said there is a limit. And what is the limit? The limit is if the beams of the house don't as long as they don't get below 10 tefachim. But if the beams of that means I say that, the door frame, so in other words, if his entranceway, the guy below, is so tight that he has to go, sort of under, less than 10 tefachim high, 10 tefachim is about the height of a tabletop. So it's a pretty awkward way to get in your front door. Then if it goes lower than that, then that's it. And the Gemora says on that there is an important caveat to that, and that's only, this is a case where they did not make any condition between them. But if they made an agreement in the first place, that means to say, when they divided the property and one took upstairs, one took downstairs, and they made an agreement that if there's subsidence, they would rebuild the house, right? If there's subsidence, they'll rebuild. They made that agreement in the first place. If they made an agreement to rebuild the house in the case of subsidence, then obviously they go with the agreement, right? That's what the Gemora says. But the Gemora said that we still need parameters, right? We still need parameters, even if there's an agreement. Yeah, if they make an agreement without specifying what the agreement, the details, right? They just said if there's subsidence and if the doorway starts falling in, right? Then you agree. We both, you upstairs agree to rebuild. Okay, fine. But what's called subsidence? There's an assumption, it seems, there's some acceptable level of subsidence. And the Gemara plays around with this a little bit. There's a suggestion from Rav Nachman that it's basically the normal way a house is built, sort of like in the sense that the normal height proportionately to the other dimensions. But the Gemara is not very happy with that. And the Gemara's conclusion is that it's basically normal living. Yeah, so it's about a third of the way down the Amud. Rav Nachman says, "Kedai inshi." as people normally live, right? If it's still within the parameters of people will consider normal, then he's got no claim, even if there was an agreement. So there's a certain amount of subsidence, but there's an acceptable level. The acceptable level is that people would consider it normal. How do you measure it? The Gemora says you measure it by basically someone who can take a bundle of long twigs, and sort of move them around in all directions. And that's considered to be a normal head height or normal space, right? So we finished off last week with a very, very simple question, okay? We split this Gemora into two halves. Number one, where there's no agreement, okay? Number two, where there is a prior agreement, yeah? Now, the conclusion of the Gemara is, if there's a prior agreement, the level of acceptability is the way people normally live, right? And whatever that is, right? Way people normally live. They can bring in their packages, bring in their whatever it is, a long bamboo schach, and they can get it through the front door. That's normal, whatever, right? So the question is, even if there's no agreement, this was the question we finished off with, even though there's no agreement, how can you possibly say that anyone is prepared to accept less than what's normal? The assumption would be, if there's no agreement, right? And I move in upstairs, and you move in downstairs, surely there should be an unwritten agreement that I'm prepared to accept, right? That I'm only prepared to accept what's normal. The guy living downstairs, right? If we're going with normality, why should that not apply to an unwritten agreement as well? That's my question. Any suggestions? No, don't all speak at once. Yeah. No,
I guess it's possible that what's normal for a 6 foot is not so normal for a 4 foot man.
Yeah, well, that might be why the Gemara measures it in terms of sort of long packages. That sometimes you'll need to bring in your front door, right? So that's okay. You might say a person taller will hold them higher. Okay, there's got to be some, there's got to be some way of measuring it. I think we accept that. The problem is why should it be? Why should it be? What's considered normal? I mean, basically, what I saw this question asked by Rabbi Leib Steinman in his Sefer Ayeles HaShachar. Ayeles HaShachar. This was his Sefer. You get it? Ayeles HaShachar. Rabbi Aaron Yehuda Leib. Right? Ayeles HaShachar. Anyway, so he was, of course, as everyone knows him, is famous, one of the great Gedolim of recent times. He passed away a couple of years ago. So I learned actually in Ponovitch, and I was a member of the Ponovitch Kollel, although mainly I was learning in the yeshiva, and he's the Rosh Kollel, and he was the Rosh Kollel. He was the Rosh Kollel. So I had an opportunity to meet him on a few occasions, not for any great length of time, but he was an incredible individual, an incredibly humble man who I remember once seeing him at a bris, just standing there like an ordinary one of the other participants. He was a complete honor. Anyway, he says like this, that you have to say as follows. Al-Kain Sorech Lomai says, the Kimon to the Fa'omim Boinim Betchila, Rak Begova Kedari in Shibudiyuk. You have to say that sometimes people build properties at exactly the acceptable level, right? Sometimes that's how the property is built in the first place. And then, since it's the norm for the walls to sink a little bit, especially in those days, that seemed to have been the norm, that was accepted that it would happen. It would come out that they'd have to, a little bit afterwards, right? They'd have to, end up knocking it down. Because if there's an acceptable level, right, the people normally accept, the diary inchi, right, this height, right? Sometimes people will actually build at that height, right? Now, subsidence seems to be inevitable. The Gemara takes it for granted. That means you could be in a situation where after a very short time, give it a couple of weeks, couple of months, whatever, it will start subsiding a little bit, right? And then they'd have to rebuild. He says the it must be the people that their intention was that even when the walls sink lower than the norm people are prepared to accept, lo yistru, they won't knock it down. And only less than 10 tefachim, where it's no longer considered, it's not called a house at all, that's when they knock it down. So it's a bit of a difficult answer. But basically what he's trying to say is like this, is that when you make an agreement, we say the measurement is what people would normally live in. And that's because you made an agreement. If you didn't make an agreement, if we would say that it's only acceptable what the way people normally live, the problem is sometimes that that's how they build the house in the first place. They build it to that height, the height where you can get your schach in the front door. And if that's the case, it might be a couple of weeks later, you have to knock the whole thing down. And that's not logical. And therefore, he says that without a specified intention, we have to say that we can only go with the next measuring stick, which is when it's no longer got the status of a house. And that is when it gets below 10 tefachim. So it's a difficult, it's difficult, but that's his suggested answer. As I say, I bet if you have any other answers on a postcard, please. But that's what his resolution of it. Okay, let's carry on with the next case in the Gemora. So I said a third of the way down. Who gavro? So basically, from here to the Mishnah, we got 4 or 5 cases, all structured in a very, very similar way. They're all different cases, but they're structured in a similar way in the sense that you've got an actual case that happened, all very fascinating, where Rav Chama ruled. He was the posek who ruled on each case, and then the Gemara in the conclusion decides what the halacha is on all these cases sort of together, where the halacha is in accordance with Rav Chama. There was a person who built a wall. He built a wall behind the windows of his friend. Yeah, classic case. The neighbor from Gehinnom. Yeah, basically, right? The guy builds a wall opposite your windows. Amalei said to him, "Come, you're darkening my windows, right? I can't see anymore because you put the wall there." Amalei said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you." He says, what I'll do is let me close up your windows here. And I'll build you new windows above the height of my wall. Now, it seems to be from Rashi, we'll see Rashi in a minute, that the biggest concern here is more about the light rather than the view. Okay? The next Gemara will come on to the question of view, because there's 2 aspects here. We're going to discuss today this whole concept of there is a technical name for it in legal terms. I don't know whether our lawyer is not here today, but there are other lawyers with us. No, who's a lawyer? Someone must be a lawyer. Who's a lawyer?
Rights of light.
Rights of light.
Rights of light. Rights of light. Okay, but that's what it is anyway. Rights of light.
You don't need a lawyer.
Okay, rights of light. There you are, rights of light. But there's also a view, right? I mean, the whatever view you've got, is that got the same term? Is that called something else, or is that got a different technical term? I don't know. But look, it certainly is.
I'm not sure view comes into it. I think rights of light is.
Okay, but it's clear that if you buy a house with a nice view, you've paid a premium for that view. Someone who's right, if your house often, right, it clearly adds value to the house, right? If you face a nice, I mean, that's obvious, no? I would imagine.
It's not obvious in Israel.
Right. Someone building in front of your house, your flat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it happens a lot.
Right. They stick up. Yeah, you're right. These things happen all the time in Israel. I know what you mean. But anyway, we'll see. Either way, Rashi seems to imply that the key concern of the individual here who's suddenly seen this wall, got up one morning and sees the wall opposite the windows, is not about what he could see out the window. It was the light coming into his house, which obviously, especially in those days, that would have been massively important, right? The light you need during the daytime, you're going to see, and whatever you need to be able to see, yeah. So he makes an interesting offer. He says, let me close up here, your windows where they are now, and I'll make your other windows above my wall. So you'll get your light and I get my wall. Omalei said back to him, if you do that, yeah, you're going to damage my wall. Why? Because that's what happens. If you have to knock holes inside a wall, yeah, it damages the foundations, damages the structure of the wall. It's not a healthy thing to do to a wall. So I'm not happy with that. Omalei said to him, he's not giving up. So what let me do is he says, I'll knock the wall down from the top, I think, until the place of that's right, until you get to the point where the windows are, and I'll rebuild the wall, okay, and I'll build you new windows in that wall above my wall, right? So, you're worried that you're going to make the wall shake by cutting out in this stone wall windows. We won't do that. We will knock the wall down until below the level of where I'm going to put the windows, and then I will rebuild a wall with those windows in situ. Beautiful solution. A wall, right, which is an old wall down below, and it is a new wall higher up, is not going to last. It's not going to last. With old cement doesn't make much. New cement, it's not going to work. I'm not going to accept that either. Omar said back to him, so son-in-law, adla ara, I'll knock the whole wall down right to the ground, and I'll rebuild it, and I'll build you windows inside it, so you'll have a completely new wall. Anything. I'll let you anything you want, basically, into it. He says to him, one new wall in an entirely old house will not stay standing. It's not going to work, okay? So he says to him, this final magnificent offer. He says, I will knock down your entire house, and I will build windows put windows in the house. We've all met these people. We all met these people, especially in property, right? They will do anything. It doesn't matter what it is to get what they want. They want the house designed, right, in a particular way. It doesn't matter who they need to pay off. That's what it is. I don't care. I will do everything it takes in order to get what I want. Amalei said to him, hold on a second. You're offering to rebuild my house? I'm going to have to move out for a year and a half. I've got nowhere to live. You're going to put me down? I don't have anywhere to live. Amalei said to him, don't worry. I'll put you up in the Hilton for a year and a half. I will rent you a room. I will rent you a house, a palace. I don't care. Amalei said to him, I can't be bothered. It's too much hassle. Oh, there's another gerus which says, I can't be bothered. I don't want it. It's a great shaila, great question. Can he at any stage, is there anything he can go? Is there any sort of how far can he go, right? There must be a certain stage, you would think, where you can say he's offering so much, the guy has to accept it. Omar Rav Chama said, Bedin koma akev. No, he can always say no. He is within his rights to say, thank you very much, but no thank you. I'm not prepared to take it. So Gemora says, Hainohach, it's the same case. It's the same case as before. In both cases, we have a situation where someone is trying to coerce someone else to accept a state of affairs that is not to his liking or favor. It is a situation he did not create of his own. And we said before that he doesn't have to accept it. It's here as well. Why do you need this case as well? Says the Gemora. It's coming to tell us even though he was only using this house, the second case is a case where even though he was only using it for, let's say, straw and wood alone. It's fascinating. He was only using that house, right, with the windows, with the light. He's not even living in it. He's actually only using it as a storage room. He's putting wood in there or straw. Nevertheless, he can say to him, I have no wish I can't be bothered to start moving out, right? My store, what I keep in my storeroom. Thank you very much. I'm very comfortable as things are. And there's nothing he can do about it. Nothing he can do about it. Right, let's just see Rashi on this. So where the Rashi is about a third of the way down.
What's the Havamina that you could force him?
That's a good question. What's the Havamina? What's the Havamina that he could force him? So I think, okay. Let's put it out there to anyone else. Let's suggest what do people think the Havamina is?
And he's potentially, for the sake of staying out, he's potentially getting himself a new house, a new build house.
Okay, but Rich's question is, if he hasn't created
the
situation.
But you could see why he could feel almost obliged, because he's going to be living in a brand new house, brand new.
Yeah, but the question is, what's the Havamina that he can force him?
Is it possible?
So I think it's something along those lines. In other words,
he is Choser, isn't it?
Exactly, that's the point. It is Choser.
That's the point. That's the meaning. That's the maskon. I mean, the Havamina, it would seem, and I'd like to take a quick look at the Shulchan Aruch when we just after we see Rashi, just to look at this. This is a nice sort of case that just exists in the next case is a different case, in and of itself. But there has to be, it would seem, that the Gemara is probing here whether there is a certain stage where the person who is building the wall can turn around to him and say, exactly, you're not losing anything by this. You're only gaining. There's no loss. And the Gemara says no, because there's always ultimately some form of loss. Even if that loss is just hassle, that's already a measurable loss. And once there's a loss, I can't force you. Does that make sense? I think that's.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah.
I think so. But we'll see the Shulchan Aruch in a minute. Let's
It doesn't
just.
have to be a monetary loss. It can be just a hassle intangible loss.
It doesn't have to be a monetary loss. Exactly. That's the chiddush of the Gemara. Yeah. It can be. Yeah. Okay. How far that goes is a question. You know, is it because once you start talking about hassle, you know, you can always claim some form of hassle. So when will you ever have a genuine zen ahen of a zelo chosa? You know, I'm benefiting and you're not losing out at all. You know, maybe there's a way of measuring it.
And that's not an example. And that's because
What was that?
And that is not clear. That's boundary where you take that to. That's not really brought out in this example because
because it's clear cut.
Most people say moving out your house for a year is pretty.
Except we're talking about just a storehouse. All he's doing is having to move his wood out. I mean, that's pretty minimal by the the Maskana.
Yeah, but there are. I mean, you can conceive of a situation where, to do with the angle of the sun and everything, that this guy wants to build a wall in his garden. It's some distance away from the windows of the other chap's house, and he thinks, what's the big deal? The sun is in the sky. He's still getting the light. The amount of light reduction is trivial, if you see what I mean. So why should I not be able to build my wall in my garden?
Right, and the answer is there must be always. There is still the fact is it's his rights. Because
by extrapolation, you could then say, well, no one could virtually do anything in their own property, which may have some small measurable effect on the next door neighbor. It happens all the time. So that's where the next case is going to be important, because the next case is almost like a reverse of this. Well, not reverse. It's a situation when someone building a wall can argue, I'm building in my property, and there's nothing you can do about it. So we have to see that case and see how that works, right? Yeah.
Can I just ask that the Gemara seems to switch examples, because it started off by saying, "Oh, Gavra Dahavabay Ashisa." So he was building behind his house, and then it ends off by saying that it's even if the house is only being used as a storehouse.
Yeah.
Which is quite different to how it opened up.
So
at what point did it switch to becoming?
So it's you're right. It's difficult in the sense that the Gemara doesn't really specify at the beginning. It just says behind his windows. It's an akimta. The Gemara's only a choice. It has to make a distinction between the two cases. What is the difference between these two psukim of Rav Chama? The Gemara wouldn't bring this was the distinction. So the distinction must be basically that here he's not even his own house, and nevertheless he's just using for storage. He's still got the same rights. You're right. It's not not clear. The beginning. Pardon?
That's a much stronger case than the beginning of the story. You can understand if someone's living in a house, you don't want light blocks, but if it's light for his storehouse, then
exactly. That's right. It's a much stronger case.
Maybe that is the hub. Maybe that's what it's coming to prove, that even if you're not living there.
Absolutely. That's still enough of a claim of hassle. That's right. Exactly.
So the Gemara basically telling us that actually there's no concept of being reasonable. I don't have to be reasonable. If the halacha is the halacha, and the other point I would make is that the first case where it seemed actually the guy was being really unreasonable, you'd think this case would come first, because this one is very open, and it's an open and shut case to me. You're doing something to actively block my light, stop it. Whereas the first case was, well, there was a lot of ambiguity. The guy on top his house is also sinking. You could say, well, your house is also going to be damaged by the fact that my house is sinking. I would have thought this case is a much stronger case. It comes first to show you that there's no such thing as reasonableness. It's either the halacha or it isn't.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I think maybe that's part of why the Gemara has to find, because this does seem to be a more obvious case, even that's why it has to sort of change it around and say the whole case is a case where it's just being used as a storage room. Where so that makes it much more of a chiddush in a way.
I see.
But I see what you mean. I see what you mean. How this case really, should have in theory come first. Yeah. We'll have to see. I mean, let's see Rashi and see what the Shulchan Aruch says and see if that helps us a little bit with it. So Rashi's about a third of the way down. Kumaras lashitoi. Sorry, one before. Sachanaloch chocha. I'm going to estem chocha lenusecha. Rashi says I'm going to stop up your windows, but avonim atzid with stones and cement or whatever. After lemala mikosoli, I'm going to open for you new windows higher than my wall. Begova ksolecha. The higher up on your wall, chalonus acherim, other windows, sheyoiru, that bring light, sheyiru lechobav veisecha, that bring light into your house. That's where I said to you that Rashi implies the whole issue here is light. That's the key concern. When you open the windows, he says, you're going to shake the wall because of the blows of the hammer when you're knocking out the windows. Sorry, next one. He says, I'll knock down the coast of the wall from the top, right, till you get to the windows that I'm going to put in for you. So he says, the new cement is not going to fit with the old one because it's already dried up. And that was his argument. The conclusion of the Gemora is, even if he's using it with wood and straw, and he himself is not living inside it, Motzi Amalei can say to him, I can't be bothered to have to remove the straw and the cement, the straw and the wood and whatever, right? So that was the that's Rashi. I want to see if I can just bring up here where this is in Shulchan Aruch. I know we're kind of jumping to Shulchan Aruch beyond the Rishonim, but I'm hoping that will, I think, give us some guidance. Let me just see if I can find this. It is in, where's this Bedina Koma'ake? We paskin like Rav.
Can you just remind us what the first case was? What was the final conclusion of the first case?
The final conclusion of the first case,
according to Rav
was Rav Chama paskined that in a case where there was no agreement between them as to what would happen if there was subsidence and the upper story fell down onto the lowest, and made the guy's doorway sink into the ground, that he cannot force the upper guy to move out and to rebuild unless it falls, until it falls lower than 10 tefachim. Yeah. Doorway sinks below 10 tefachim, right? Then he can force him to rebuild. Otherwise, he can't. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's the case. Let me just, I want to bring this up on, I just want to bring this up on Barilan. Let me find it first and I'll share the screen. Yeah, here we go. Okay, let me just share. Okay, there you go. Yeah, can you see that? Yeah. You got that? You see that? Okay, so he says like this. Mi shahayu chalonos, this is Shulchan Aruch. Mi shahayu chalonos lamata b'kosoloi. Someone who has windows below his friend's wall. The guy comes and he wants to build in front of them. He says to him, I'll open a few other windows above this one. He can turn, he can stop him. He says to him, but when you open the windows, you're going to shake the wall, but you're going to ruin the wall. And even if he says, I'll knock down the whole wall, I'll build you a new wall, and I'll put windows above, and I'll hire for you a house. I'll rent for you a house that you can live in it until I finish the building works. He can stop him. He can say to him, I can't be bothered moving from one place to another. Even if he's only using it to store wood in. So thus far is just literally the Gemora, spelled out in a halachic framework, right? That's it, yeah? Therefore, says Shulchan Aruch, if there was no bother at all, and he doesn't need to move out, he cannot stop him building the wall. Oh, this is a new halach, I think. This is saying that the person who has windows, who wants to change the positioning of the windows, bein lamala, bein lamato, whether higher or lower, I'll open for you another small one and I'll close this one. He can stop him. If he can stop him, he can stop him doing that. You can't change the position of windows. Okay, so that's a different halacha. Maybe we'll come to that elsewhere about whether he can change the positioning or the size of the windows, because that's going to affect the place, the one person who lives, let's say, in the chotzer below or whatever, right? So I'm just coming back to Eli's point about reasonableness. Can you see that, right? That extra line the Shulchan Aruch puts in there, lefichoch im lo hayasham terach klal. If there was no hassle at all and he doesn't have to move out, he can't stop him. So I don't know whether that helps you, Eli, or not, because there you see that it's not a blanket thing that you can always say, I don't care, I'm not moving. I don't agree to anything. There has to be some level of reasonableness. What do you think? Do you agree?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to see what scenario someone would say that there's no inconvenience to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It's difficult to measure. I mean, I'm just looking, you see here at the Sma. Can you see I brought up the Sma here? So one of the main portion of the Shulchan Aruch. So he says the reason is from the Kofna Medas Sodom. Yeah. So this is the whole idea. As far as this is basically the idea that Kofna Medas Sodom is where I'm basically, as far as I recall, is I'm benefiting and you're not losing. There's nothing. You're not losing anything at all. Why is it in your why is it disturbing you, right? Yeah. Isn't that to do with the Mishnah and Avos, isn't it? Shadi,
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever. Anyway, yeah, that's what I think it's saying. So there we are.
So based on the Shulchan Aruch and the fact that the Gemora gives these responses about, I don't want you to put new windows on the wall because it'll impact the wall, or a new wall or an old wall. Let's say those engineering responses actually weren't valid. Would that mean that actually you can compel him?
That's an interesting question. Well, no, because the Gemara's conclusion is that hassle alone is, a tircha alone of having to move out is enough of a reason to stop him doing the building work. The Gemara, what the Shulchan Aruch adds, right, is this extra little thing that there has to be some level of inconvenience. I know that's not a major chiddush. It's just that, the question of, I think that, as Eli brought up, the question of reasonableness is a really, really important question. Do we say reasonableness has a part to play in halacha? I definitely think it does, right? I definitely think it does. But the question is, where does the balance of power lie? And it's quite clear here that the person who is being inconvenienced, he is in the driving seat. He has got the right to say, listen, I'm inconvenienced. Unless objectively there's clearly nothing at all that he's losing out. A simple example might be where the guy, and it's wondering the Gemara doesn't say this, let's say the other guy offers to pay to move the wood out while he does the building work or something like that, right? And you're going to have wood, you're going to have firewood at your front door every evening, right? The whole duration of the building works. You're not going to lose anything, you're going to gain. You see what I mean? So that might be a situation where you could turn to him and say, you're not losing anything else. Why should I? Yeah.
Right, and that's the reason why the Gemara doesn't use the words "any reiter." You can't respond back saying "I don't want." Yes, there actually has to be a detriment to him or something.
That's right, exactly.
But the Shulchan Aruch does use the word "klal," and "klal" means anything, really.
They use klal. Imloshon Torah klal. You're right. Yeah,
so it's quite a very low threshold.
Yeah, very low threshold. Yeah. Look, it'll be nice to keep this case in our heads to see if we can come back to it in that sense. It's quite an easy case to remember. So let's try and keep it in mind, and we'll see if we can expand on it in other scenarios. Yeah.
Is that an objective test or is that a subjective test? As in, if you have a thoroughly reason, is that klal?
It seems to be objective, meaning if it came to Beis Din, the way the Shulchan Aruch phrases it, im lo hayasham terach klal, objectively, if there's no terach there at all, right? He doesn't need to move out, and there's no hassle, and the Beis Din will paskin and say, listen, Kofin means what it means. You force it. You're being unreasonable, right? That's the yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, let's go to the next case. The first wide line. Hanu Beitre Achi. You had two brothers. Depalgi Badi Adodi. They split a property between them. Chadmachi Espelida. One of them inherited the like a palace or a nice house or whatever. It was a whole estate, and one of them gets the country house. The Chadmachi Tarbitza, and the other one gets the gardens in front of the house. Right now. Ozal Hahu Demachi Tarbitza, the one who got the gardens, went V'koboni Ashisa Puma Despelida, and he went and built a wall facing the house. It's in his garden. Omele said to him, the other one said to him, Solai, you're darkening my house. You're building a wall, and now you're causing my. Ophel means darkness. That's literally what it means. We'll have to see exactly what he's doing wrong, but the simple pshat seems to be that he's causing him to lose light. That's how Rashi understands it. Omele said to him, "B'didi kombanina, I am building in my own property. I'm building in my own property. It's nothing to do with you. I'm allowed to build where I want." That's what he said. Now, Omer Rav Chama said, "B'din komale." He's right. It's within his rights. He's within his rights to say, "I'm building my own property, and the fact that this causes you a bit of darkness is not my problem. Is not my problem. Is not my problem." That's what he says, right? So
the property itself has no chazaka.
Pardon?
The property itself has no chazaka. It's only the fact that the new owner has a chazaka. That seems strange to me.
I mean, let's see. Okay, so let's see those Rashis on chazaka. Let's just see the Rashi here. So Rashi says, Ispelida is Traklin Yofe is a nice castle. Whatever Tarbitza Gino should be Traklin in a garden next to the Traklin Shoya Semir Seichoi. That was cool. It brings the light into the house. That's how you get the light comes from the garden sort of thing into the house. But the Nafshoik or Nobonino, Rashi says, B'Shaliani Boina, I'm building my own property. You don't have 3 years chazaka of the light of that light usage, right? Or whatever, rights of light. You haven't been there. You haven't got chazaka of that for 3 years. The hashtahu de palginu, because we divided now. This is what we inherited this together, and we divided the estate. You got this, and I got this. There's no chazakas, as Eli said. There's nothing. It's not that the estate has the chazaka. We have to have developed that right. There's no right there for that, and therefore, I am entitled to build the wall of my property, and the fact that it darkens your property is irrelevant. So therefore,
why is this case different?
Why is this case different? So fundamentally, the key question of this case and why it's different to the previous case is because we're talking here about an inheritance scenario. So they are both kicking off from point 0. Okay, that's the key point. The previous case, I have my house has light coming in, right? You want to do some building work that is going to cause me a problem. And the problem starts with darkening the windows. Actually, the Gemora moved on from that straight away, right? I'm going to put you new windows in. So there's no problem of light anymore, right? That was the solution there. So really the light issue there was only the beginning part. You know what I mean? That was dealt with immediately, right? I'm going to deal with the light. I'm going to put higher windows higher up. But then there was all the other hassles and whatever. But there, I mean, within my rights to say, you can't cause me any hassle. I don't want you to do this. This is a case where we are dealing now with laws of rights of usage and ownership, where we both come into a property. What are my rights? What are my rights? And that's where the Gemara is going to take the discussion here in the direction of, hold on a second. Surely they inherited it from somewhere, and there must have been an established use for the building, right? To have light coming in this way. It's not so simple, right? You don't really start at 0, right? You came from somewhere. You inherited it from the estate was inherited from your father, and he used the estate in this way. Okay, so this is what we're going to deal with. Does that make sense, Jeremy?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Omele Ravina Ravashi. So Ravina said to Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, the truth is, just before we go on and to see how the Gemara takes this, it is worth at this moment just seeing this Tosfos, because it's important to understand the difference between them. Can you see this Tosfos Omale? Yeah. Omale b'didi kobonino. Pirush HaKuntras. Can you see that halfway down the Omid in Tosfos? Yeah, he brings Rashi. Rashi says, Rashi learns that you haven't got a right of 3 years of having the light. By the way, that relates to the big machlokas we saw, over a few weeks ago, yeah? About whether you have cheskas tashmish needs 3 years. Remember? Cheskas tashmishin, usage rights, is it 3 years or can it even be immediately? Rashi here seems to learn like the Rosh. Remember we learned the machlokas between the Rosh and the Rashbam, yeah? Where the Rosh learns that it's always 3 years. Right to use is 3 years, just like land is 3 years. Chazaka is 3 years, yeah? Whereas other Rishonim say no. Sometimes it can be an immediate chazaka, right? An immediate chazaka when it comes to the usage rights. So I'm just pointing out, Rashi seems to learn here like the Rosh. Says Tosfos, v'teimo. It's astonishing. Tosfos asks, are you telling me that this guy could seriously build a wall to darken his property completely so it would have no light? I mean, that's how Rashi seems to imply, right? You look at Rashi, what does Rashi say? You've got no chazaka of light. You've got no rights to light. And therefore what? I can literally build a wall as high as I like and block all your light because you've got no chazaka. Is that logical, says Tosfos, that you should be allowed to do that, right? So then he's going, sorry, okay, let's leave that out because that's in the next bit of the Gemara. I just want to get to Rabbeinu Tam here, a few lines after that. Mefarish Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam explains, the case, he says, is that from the Espelida, from the palace, he could see his fields through the garden. When he says, you're darkening me, he couldn't see his fields. You with me? Tosfos says it's nothing to do with light. This was about view. This is about being able to see your fields. Etc. We'll come on to the concept of a question of whether you have a right to a view. Tosfos is just very, very unhappy with the idea that the whole discussion of the Gemora can be surrounding a basic right to have some light, yeah, and therefore he says it's a more nuanced point about the right I have to be able to see my property, my fields, on the other side of the garden, he says it's called darkening because he couldn't see too far away. Okay, then okay, and then he goes on to, and then basically he's explaining how that fits into the Gemara, I think, later on.
Why is that any different from light, though?
What?
Why is that? Why is a view, if you're talking about a chazaka of light, is there no such thing as a chazaka of a view?
So, well, this is the thing. Tosfos' main problem is that Rashi seems to imply that the case is where he's blocking the light completely, right? And you've got no right to light because you've got no chazaka. Tosfos says that can't be. It can't be you've got no right to light at all, right? Just because you had never been there before, just because you're arriving on the scene now. Tosfos says he uses this phrase just before where it says Mefarish Rabbeinu Tam. He says the bias below ora ain't a shovek klum. Yeah, a house, doesn't matter how beautiful the house is, right? A house with no windows, right, to take it to an extreme, is worth nothing. It's worth garnish. There can't be such an arrangement, yeah, where you can make a logical argument in court. You with me? To say, oh, it's okay, you've got no right to light, therefore I can build a wall right in front of your windows completely, right? I mean, so as I said, Rabbeinu Tam learns that we're talking about the view. The later on in Tosfos, towards the end, you just see towards the end, he says, I think he's learning similar to Rashi, but he's just changing a little bit. He's saying, basically, he says that the case is that there wasn't enough light. Yeah, there wasn't enough light. The light that is necessary. Yeah, the light that is necessary, but it was still a bit of light, right? It just wasn't as much light as it really needed. So there you go. But the main thing to bear in mind is that Tosfos learns that Rabbeinu Tam learns that we're not talking about light here, we're talking about view. Okay. So let's see the Gemara. Amalei Ravina Ravashi with me, yeah. Amalei Ravina Ravashi. So Ravina said to Ravashi, what is the difference between the following brisa? Shneach and Shecholku. You have two brothers who divide a plot of land. One of them took a vineyard, and one of them took a steilovon. Steilovon is like a field where you're growing crops or whatever. Yesh lo lebala kerem dalad amos b'steilovon. The owner of the vineyard is assumed to have 4 amos into the field, the field the crops are growing in. Shalmanos kein cholku, because they divided the land on that basis. On that basis. So Rashi says, Dalad amos l'avodas hakerem. What's the 4 amos for? 4 amos is the agreed and understood space you need to work your vineyard. You need the plow, the turning circle or whatever it is of the oxen. You need 4 amos for that. So the Gemara's question is, why is it that in the case of 2 brothers, same thing, who divide land, and one takes a vineyard and one takes the fields that they're growing crops in, the owner of the vineyard is assumed to inherit, the land he needs to use the vineyard normally. So here as well, if I get the country manor, right, and the other one gets the surrounding land estate, it should be assumed that I've got the land I need, the rights I need to use my inheritance properly, which is either, according to Rashi, the right to light, and according to Tosfos, the right to see my fields at the end of the estate. You with me? Yeah. Omali says no. There, the case is that the owner of the vineyard paid off the owner of the fields. He paid for the higher value that the vineyard has. The vineyard has higher value than land growers who grow crops in, and he paid for it. Okay, he paid for it. Therefore, he's entitled to take the vineyard together with the space he needs to service the vineyard. Aval hoch over here, says the one, what are you saying? You telling me here there was no money that changed hands? Are you telling me here that the guy who inherited the house, the big beautiful house, did not pay any extra to the guy who inherited the garden? Are we talking about fools? The high shokel esplida, high shokel tarbitza, that one of them takes the palace and one of them takes the garden, and they don't pay off each other. It's ridiculous. No one would agree. Yeah, no one's going to agree to take. Which of the brothers is going to agree to take the garden when the other one takes the manor? Yeah. Amalei said to him, hold on a second. He says, no. Yes, they paid each other off the money for the building, the bricks and mortar. He paid him off. The guy who got the house had to pay the guy who got the garden, for the extra value of the wood, the bricks, whatever different types of building materials, for sure. But to me avira lo olu lahadodi, but they did not pay. They didn't get into the value of literally the air, meaning that either as Tosfos learns the view or Rashi the light. Yeah. So. You with me? So the Gemara is making a straightforward chiluk, and basically saying that Rav Chama Paskan that he has a right to build a wall because there's no chazakas or anything else. I can build my wall. It's my land. The Gemara asks, hold on a minute. When we have other cases of dividing land, it's understood that I can use the land normally. Here as well, like working the vineyard. Here as well, the normal use of the land is I can get light in my property. The answer is no, because there is a limit to how much they are assumed to have paid for. He's assumed to have paid for. He's paid for the right. He's paid for the fact that he's got a better deal out of the estate, so that it works out financially. But he hasn't paid as far as having the right for light or for the view, whatever it is. Yeah. So the Gemara says, why didn't he just say to him, you originally gave me, when we made the division of our father's estate, you gave me the right to a palace. Hashta now, that was what I got. Hashta now, mashvizli, you've made for me in Duruna. You've made it into a dark room. You've made it into a dark room, right? By the way, this is why Tosfos is not so, the Tosfos is not so easy to, Tosfos has to deal with this, because with Rashi it fits much better, the Gemara. You see that, right? Is it dark? You're darkening my room. Tosa has to say it means I can't see properly far away. It doesn't fit so well. Yeah. Anyway, why can't he say to him, you basically he said, this is a different argument. He's saying like this: I paid you extra for you to take the garden and me to take the house. What did I pay for? I paid for a nice house. You've sold me a sealed room. It's got no light, basically. Or it's just not, it's like a mekachtos. Are you with me? Yeah. So now this Rav Simi Rashi is a very interesting answer. I'm Rav Simi Barashi. Rav Simi Rashi says, Shmo ba'alma polagle. No, he says, he's only giving him what he got in the deal was the name. That's it. He just got the name, the title to what it's, if it still retains the name, if it's still called a palace or a manor house or whatever, even if it doesn't really match up to what most people would assume a nice manor house has, such as the nice view or a lot of light, yeah? Even so, if it still qualifies as a manor house, it's a manor house, and there's nothing you can do about it. Shmo ba'alma polagle. It's like someone who goes to buy a country estate, and he pays up front without seeing the property, and then which is a bit of a silly thing to do, and then he walks inside the country house, right? And he realizes that what he's been sold is a tin shed. Now, clearly, that's a mekachtos, right? But if he goes and visits this manor house that he's bought, I don't know, in the Shetland Islands, and it's a manor house, but it's complete wreck. But it's still a house. It's still so it's got he's bought what he paid for, and that's it. He should have looked at it first. So that's how it is. Milo Tanya, says the Gemara, didn't we learn in the Bryce a similar thing? Somebody says, I'm selling you a base core, which is a certain measure of land, of earth, or here it's really a base core is a certain quantity of earth, I think. Yeah. It's a measure. Even if it actually is only the size of a lesech, which is much smaller. He only selling him the name. He sold him, I'm selling you a base core off of who the mystery base core, as long as it's called a base core. In other words, like this, Ruvain has a plot of land, yes, that is called Ruvain's base core. And everyone in the village knows that this is Ruvain's base core, okay? Now, actually, Ruvain's base core is nicht so groß base core. It's actually only the size of a lesech, right? It's only half the size of a base core, yeah? Right? It's actually, instead of being 5 meters, it's actually 2 meters. But because it's a Nebuch village and everyone has tiny quantities of land, everyone calls it Ruvain's base core. A guy walks into the village and pays for Ruvain's base core. And he turns around the next day and he says, excuse me, Ruvain, that's not a base core. I took out my measuring rod and it's nothing. It's nowhere near a base core. And he says, everyone knows that my plot of land is called Ruvain's base core. You with me? If it's really called that, and that's what it's called. That's what it's called. I mean, Tosfos here points out that it has to be that the buyer knows that it's called a base core. It has to be a clarity in advance that he knows he knows what it's called, and it really, again, it's his own fault because otherwise he's tricking him. Okay. Yeah. So now, and again, more other examples. The Brysik says, I'm selling you a vineyard. Even if it doesn't have pomegranates in, he gets it. So part of this here seems to be understood to mean a part of a vineyard or whatever, a pomegranate yard. That can't be right. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, it's a pomegranate. Yeah, that's what he doesn't have any pomegranates in. It's an orchard. That's what it is. Even hasn't got pomegranates in. It's his. He's selling him the name, and that's what it is. Even if it's got no pomegranates in. Who the mystery paradise, as long as it's still called a paradise. I'm selling you a vineyard. Even though it doesn't have any vineyard, it doesn't have any vines in. It's an amazing thing. He says I'm a vineyard with no vines in. Right? It's still his. That's it. Tough luck. He's only selling him the name of the property. That's what it's called. That's what it's called. Who the mystery karma? As long as it's still called a vineyard. As long as it's still called a vineyard. I mean, Tosfos has a whole other problem here, which is, you should say domim modiim. This is the Gemora says in various cases, you should look at the value. Yeah. If I paid £1,000 for this plot of land, then surely that should swing it in my favor if there's no vines. Yes. right? Tosis has that problem, okay? That's what his problem is. So you have to say that he basically it was a very low price. You have to also say that he offered him a very low price for the land. So again, we're sort of redressing the balance a little bit as to why this guy can't come screaming afterwards and saying, this is not fair, it's not right. It's just because he lowered the price. So, he in a way, I suppose we're saying a little bit, he should have put 2 and 2 together. Anyway, that's what the Gemora is saying. The Gemora is saying is, as long as it's still called a country house and palace, then tough luck. Says Mami Domi is not comparable. Hossam, what's your Malay over there? He can say to him, the seller can say to the buyer, I sold you the name of the property that's called this. Hoch over here, what's your Malay can say to him, we divided it on condition that I would live in this property as our fathers lived in it. Now he's pulling out the Yerusha card. Yeah. So he's saying like this: it's okay when you sell something to someone else, where you sell him something and it's called what you sold. Then you can tell him, look, you should have done your homework. You should have checked if there were vines there. Everyone knows it's called a vineyard. You knew you were buying the thing that's called a vineyard. Whatever. So that's a different question, right? Here, he's saying that we divided up on condition that I would be able to live the same way our ancestors did. And I can't, because it's a brick wall. It's going to be dark there. I can't be able to see anything. Omrli said to him, Mari Yunuka, Mar Kashisha Breder of Chista, Le Rav Ashi, Mari Yunuka, top of the next Omar, Mari Yunuka, Mar Kashisha, the son of Rav Chista said to Rav Ashi, Nardoi Latal Mayu. The Nardoi are going according to their reasoning. Nardoi is Rav Chama. Rav Chama is from Nahardor. The Omar of Nachman, Omar Shmuel, because Rav Nachman says the name is Shmuel, who I think must have also been from Nahardor, and he said like this: Achin shecholku, if you have brothers who divide up a piece of land, ein lohen lo derech zelzeh, they don't have any right to a pathway through each other's land, even if the ancestors did. Even if their father had a right of way, okay. They can't complain about anyone closing up their light, so they can't see it. They don't have one took an upstairs, one took a downstairs, one took upstairs, one took a chotzer, for example. He's not allowed to fix a ladder in his friend's courtyard just because his father did. They don't have a right to a channel of water, right? To bring it from the river to carry it through the other guy's field. No rights, all disappears. The Hizarubai, and he says, he concluded, be careful with these, because these are fixed halachas. They are fixed halachas and don't mess around with them. Then the Gemara brings a dissenting view of Rav Omar. Rav says, yesh lahen. They do have all these rights. So we're saying that Rav Chama paskend, like the other poskim in the Nahardor, and they rule that this idea of rights that were previously established for ancestral rights, our father always enjoyed a nice view from his property. Doesn't matter. That has no bearing on the division that's made. It really, in that respect, it starts from ground zero once they do the division. Okay? Yeah. Let's just very quickly see Rashi on this, so we can complete it. It's just towards the end of the previous Amud. He says, we said that they plowed it with oxen. The owner of the vineyard gave to the Baal Sodeh Lavan, to the person who was growing crops. He gave him money, the value of the vineyard. Therefore, he can take a vineyard with the space to work the vineyard. So more asked, are we dealing with fools? Is he foolish? They'll take an empty garden corresponding to a built house. Won't take any extra payment money. Of course he would. Of course, if he said they must have paid off each other. So then we answered that by saying no, because they didn't go into the detail of the view or the light. But then we said, you can say to him, it's a dark house. I paid extra money to get a pallet, to get a nice house, not to get a dark room. So the one says Shmo Ba'alma. All he got was the name. Ima Splida Shmo. If its name was or Splida Shmo, it's called in a Splida. Even it's not like any others. The name is not lost. So Mishkan, the size of a base square is discussed elsewhere. It's actually a whole parak in Bava Basra, a small parak though. It's a 2 saw like the size of the Chotzer HaMishkan, the way they measure in the Mishkan. Next, Omid Nardoy L'Talmayu, Rav Chamad ben Nardo, Rav Chamas from Nardo, he's from Nardo. He doesn't hold this idea that I get to live as my ancestors did, and it was on that basis that we divided it. Also, the Talmayu, he goes according to the reasoning that Nardoy. He follows Shmuel's view. Shmuel lived in Nahardor, and Rav Chama follows Shmuel. He's also from Nahardor. This one took one to the north, this to the south. His father used to go through one into the other. You can't say I've got a right to it. He hasn't got any windows to complain. He can't complain about the light being sealed off. Ladders. If this one took a house and the courtyard, someone took an upstairs story. He's got no right to fix a ladder to go up to his upstairs story. To bring it from a river through the other guy's field. All those rights disappear. So this is basically what the Gemora is saying is that when you have a division, an inheritance, it does begin from that point 0. And in the sense that, yes, there may be agreements that are made, I'm paying off a certain amount, that's fine, paying off for certain things, but when it comes to rights such as, which go beyond that, such as the right to light or the right to a view, you can't come along with claims and saying, my father had that, enjoyed that. No. This is not, that doesn't carry forward. That's on our Ardor's views. Okay, so we will continue it next week. And if there's any points, we're out of time now, but if there's any points people want to raise,
will you explain why next week, why that svara applies, why that is?
Yeah, so let's try and have a think at the beginning next week. It was nice just to finish it off with the Rashi, but let's begin next week with trying to understand maybe a little bit why this svara exists. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Sure, thank you.
Have a good evening. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, pleasure.